Well, hello, Rebekka.
Hello. Should I hold it up like you do?
I like to do this, but
Oh,
I think honestly we should probably clip it. That's easier
okay.
than holding it. I don't know. I feel like I should hold it, but we are in Lund, Sweden. Rebekka, welcome back. You
Thank
are
you.
now a reoccurring guest on this podcast.
Oh, that's such an honor.
Yeah. So yeah, we are here for our third learning lab for the Human Factors and System Safety program at Lund University. I thought it would be fun to bring this in case I wanted to do an impromptu podcast
And
in
it's
Europe.
it's the best day ever in November in Lund.
It
So we
is
took that. We took
November
that.
in Sweden, and it looks like this. It's sunny. We don't even need jackets. I think every Swedish person would say this is a rarity, right? To have a day like this.
Unique day. Yes, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start? How's the week been for you so far?
So maybe we should start explaining what Learning Lab 3 means for us as students,
Yes.
because we are in a Human Factors and System Safety program. And we did a lot of assignments to get familiarized with all the literature and form some of our own opinions on that. And now we are preparing for year 2, which is all about writing a master's thesis. So we're developing our own ideas right now, research questions, thinking about what problems we want to address, what problems are meaningful to us. Actually, that's where to start. Like what is close to your heart? Where do you feel like there's a gap in knowledge that we really should address, and what makes you feel empowered in that? So that's what this
It's
week
a
has
cool way
all.
to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
this week has all been about. So apart from lectures, we've just been developing these ideas. We put them all on posters on the wall, which is really cool, and we started to walk around randomly, talking to each other on the development of our ideas, and that's, I think,
It's amazing how helpful it is.
it is, and how great this opportunity is, because how often in your professional life do you get a week where you can just explore ideas, have a free flow of thought, and
With
with
people from different areas, from different countries, from
exactly.
different levels of experience, it
So
is
it
unique.
has been so exciting, and yeah, I wish I could do this for the rest of my life, but of course people need to work too, and we need to get back to work next week. But to have this experience, it's been so good.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it
what do
really
you
has
think?
been. I think so, or I'll backtrack first. Oh, there's smokes. So for our program, the entire first year is learning a lot of theories and frameworks around this idea of safety science. And then the entire second year is dedicated to our thesis. So as Rebekka was saying, this whole learning lab is us getting ready, prepping for what we're going to do for our research question. And it's really cool that the whole second year is dedicated to our own research and going for something that we're passionate about. So I've really enjoyed this week. I've formulated a ton of good thoughts. I've had some very good conversations. You've helped me tremendously with formulating how I want to approach my idea for my thesis. So I've really enjoyed this week so far, and I feel the same with you, that it's just such a unique experience to be able to bounce ideas like this. And I think there's something, we have Zoom meetings, but you just can't recreate this on a Zoom.
No, I don't think so either. And it's also, I think this is, we've had learning labs before, so we know each other, but to really talk about each other's passions and ideas also makes you know one another on a different level. And I think that's really been a group bonding experience as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
which is, I think, really important, because once we go writing our thesis, we're pretty much for the first time on our own, much more than in a community. So it's good to build this strong community so that we can continue it on our own while we're writing our individual work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people back home, they know I'm going to Europe, so they'll be like, "Oh, like you go to Sweden? That's so fun. What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I wake up, I get ready, I go to class from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., sometimes a little later, and then basically have a little intermission or just go straight to dinner with everybody, and we keep talking about these concepts, then go to bed, rinse, wash, repeat." So it's not so much a vacation or holiday in that sense, but it's a really awesome experience, and it's yeah, I've enjoyed it. I don't know where I was going on that track, but
You were wondering what people were thinking when you're going here, that you're
Yeah,
going on holiday, but that's
but it's much different, I think, than people envision when I say I'm going to Sweden.
yeah,
Because typically when Americans come to Europe, it's purely vacation, so it's a
yes.
different experience coming here for school. But it's a really, really cool and unique experience being here in this program. So, what would you? I know we talked about this last time, but I'm curious. How would you frame? And I struggle to articulate this program to someone who has no background, maybe a little background, maybe a fair amount of background, and what would you recommend for people interested in, say, this kind of field?
So the way I usually describe it when I talk to other people, because if you say I'm studying human factors and system safety, then even I don't
It
understand
just goes whoop
what we're doing.
in one ear out the other.
So I usually explain it in terms like we are studying safety, how safety works in complex environments, and complex environments. I also narrow it down to those are like work environments where there is so much going on and there are so many connections between people and groups of people that no one can have a complete overview of what's happening everywhere. So there's always an educated guess on what's happening elsewhere in the system. And that's where errors can or adverse events can occur, not because someone's doing a bad job, but because no one can really oversee what's happening in the whole system, what the
Yep.
state of the whole system is. And so it's very different from linear thinking, where you think there's a cause and a direct effect, where you can put a barrier in between.
Yep.
Where here you don't know where the problem is going to turn up in the system, and it's usually um, that certain conditions might change the state of the system in unexpected ways because it resonates. Usually, I don't go that far actually in my explanation, but
Well, I think the idea of a root cause is something we push back heavily against, and the it's appealing to people. I think when something bad happens, and especially when really bad stuff happens, that we're able to explain it and explain it in a way that makes sense to people. So our default is almost to come up with find a root cause or root causes to say this event led to this event. And like Rebekka was saying, if we're like, oh, well, this is the root cause, all we need to focus on is this one cause, and we can put a barrier or we can do anything. But in complex systems, that just doesn't apply because things are so complex. Like, say, I'm trying to think what would be a good example. Like in child welfare, the state has a case open on a child, and the child, while investigation is open, the child dies from abuse.
yeah.
Now, is there a root cause to how this happened? I mean, you can go back on so many levels on how the worker interacted, how the family interacted, how the system interacted, what constraints there were, what laws and regulations led to the decisions that were being made. And there's all these factors across system levels that influence and shape outcomes. But usually, after a bad outcome, we tend to only focus on the things that were closest to it. When in reality, there's all this different stuff going on that shape outcomes, and it's perhaps overwhelming to think about. So it's much easier to go and pick a few variables that you can construct, but that's all you're doing is constructing.
Right. So yeah, if I take I cannot give a concrete example from my workplace because of confidentiality issues. But I think a couple of weeks ago, I'm an anesthesiologist, so I gave anesthesia to a patient, and during the surgery, I found out some information that was really important to us that I really would have liked to know beforehand. And the information didn't get into the electronic health record system in time. It didn't get transferred to me in time. And I must say, even though I understand complex systems, I really felt angry because it posed a real danger. And I started calling where I thought, this is who should have informed me, and who should have put it in the charts.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting. Our default's almost blame.
yeah, yes. So even if I know, it's still you're emotional, and that's what happens in your brain, and it's a process that happens to all of us. And I didn't overtly blame someone, but I was like, I'm trying to find out how this happened, and I just took the closest one to me that I think should have informed me.
Like,
And
why didn't he tell me?
yes,
Or she?
this person explained like this is how I was involved, but it was sort of tangentially.
What is it?
Like it was not he was not directly involved. He was like involved from the side tangentially. Is that a word?
Uh, Not in English.
Oh,
I'm trying to think.
all right.
It,
It doesn't
he
matter.
was involved, but
He
not
was
directly. Yeah.
he was involved not directly, and I could see how it was not his responsibility to put it in a chart and to inform me. So then I went to the next person that I thought like, okay, that makes sense. I should have had that person. I called that person, and he's like, okay, yeah, well, but the patient is only has only been in our care for this specific surgery, but actually it's a patient from another specialty.
Mm.
So I called that person, and he's like, yeah, but we only took over this patient because he developed these symptoms, but actually half a day before he was from that department. And
So I
so
got this
we got
confusing.
all these layers, and everyone actually tried to convey the right information at the right time, but the system was so complex because there were so many people and departments involved that somehow the information got diluted and it didn't get to
Mm.
me. And in the end, I couldn't be angry at anyone, and I felt really like the way Scott Snook describes it in his book Friendly Fire. Like everyone did his job actually quite well, and everyone had the right
And
intentions.
this very piece of important information did not get to me, and it makes total sense
It
why it
makes
didn't, which is a scarier thought than, oh, someone just forgot, because that's
yes,
easily, I guess in your head, well, next time they can just send it.
but it's also like
Now it's like I don't even know what to do. Where do I start?
yeah, I don't even know how to fix this, but also there's no one left to blame, and I don't want to blame anyone. I want to fix it, but it's also like how do you fix such a complex system, and that's difficult, and sometimes we cannot,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where just errors occur, and it's also an important realization that we cannot foresee everything and build in barriers for everything, because then it would slow down the system so much that we couldn't actually help patients anymore.
I think that's a good point. I think another thing that happens when there's bad outcomes is people, outside of defaulting to root cause, linear thinking, blame. The next thing is, well, what are we going to do about this? To the thought being, make sure this doesn't happen in the future.
Right.
But you have to be careful, because adding more to a system and changing things doesn't necessarily make systems better or safer. And it can create new challenges and new problems when you add so much. And sometimes you add things that are actually conflicting for workers
Absolutely.
that become very unclear and don't make sense. And that can just make things more and more
Yeah,
difficult.
and I don't know how this is in social services, although can make an educated guess, but we have so many rules in healthcare that there are a lot of conflicting rules, and you cannot comply with all these rules, and even with the tens of thousands of rules that there are, you cannot even know them all.
Well, and the other part in healthcare is simply, if you guys followed every single policy procedure as written, patients would die because you wouldn't be able to do the job in
Exactly.
time. So it's but then say a bad outcome happens, someone makes a mistake in hindsight and a patient dies. It's very easy to go back and for people to say, well, they didn't follow this policy, they shouldn't have overridden the medicine cabinet, they should have done this, they should have done that, if they had followed this patient would be alive, when
Right.
the reality of the work is it's much messier than people intend. And what else I think people should appreciate is how often things go right in healthcare and
Yeah.
social services when we're dealing with incidents where there's already been harm or alleged harm done, and we're coming in very difficult, ambiguous situations. In the vast majority of cases of clients, the outcomes are actually quite well. You never even know about these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So I think it's the part of the story. I think what is also interesting is how my brain works in the need to find the culprit and the need to find out where it went wrong. Um, is how that's a normal process as well, because I don't know how you feel about this, but we have people in safety saying like we should go to a culture where I'm thinking about how they phrase it. Uh,
You know the or
Yeah, I mean,
some buzz or essence.
I'm thinking even about the Dutch word oordeel is the Dutch word, the word judgment, a judgment-free culture where there's no judgment.
How do
Um,
you?
so if something happens in a healthcare organization, that we should look at it primarily without judgment.
Yeah,
And I
which is
think
impossible. So I guess minimal judgment, right?
so.
Being the
So
goal.
that's the thing. I think like if you say that, I think it's admirable if you want to try to get there. But if you say no judgment, and that's the lens we should always use, that's also quite normative language, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because
What is no judgment?
we are inherently we are born with a judgment system, and it works all the time. We judge things all the time. Also,
We judge ourselves.
we judge ourselves, but we also judge situations. And this is safe, this is unsafe, and this is how we go through the world. We judge everything. We put them in categories. So thinking that we can reach a judgment-free system is impossible. And I think our brain also, when something like this happens to me, I cannot, in the immediate moment, I cannot say, I would never use judgment. It just happens. Our brain judges the situation, and it judges where you should go to. I don't know, find solutions, but also sometimes retribution. Doesn't mean you should act on those judgments. But I think what would be good is if we start learning how to notice the
Just be
judgment
aware that we
happening,
have these. Yeah.
and then you can make a choice.
Do I want to go down this path?
Is it and also is it reasonable?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, but if you don't notice it, if you just follow it blindly, I think you should follow them blindly for a lot of the times, anyways, because otherwise your life just you couldn't live your life. But where should you pause? So, in which situation should you pause and think like, this judgment is actually interesting? Should I follow this line of thought, or should I think of there might be an alternative way to look at this?
Yeah.
So how do you think about this?
I I don't know. I think just if so, you mean like almost your initial reaction to something when you
Yeah.
feel
So
this.
should you judge that you have an initial reaction at all?
I think I think like I'm just being aware that you'll have biases and you'll have judgments, and based on your own experience and where you are in your connection to whatever it is, you'll feel different ways about it. And I think as best you can, being aware that that exists is the first step. And then second, deciding, well, what's the goal here of what I'm judging? Am I trying to get useful information? Do I feel that someone did something so egregious in my head that I just want to punish and blame this person? So I guess then trying to understand what's my purpose of doing this here? Do I want to punish someone just for the sake of punishment because something bad happened, or do I want to learn something useful and see what I can get from this incident?
Yeah. So if you trip over my bag when we leave this nice bench here, or whether I actually stick out my foot and you trip on that, so your initial reaction might be anger at
Mother,
me.
yeah.
Yeah, well, you can choose whatever you want to say on your podcast.
I don't curse on the podcast.
So
Yeah.
then you okay then you notice this, like, Rebekka, and put in your own words what you think. But you might think a lot of things about me, like, how could you do that? But then in some more some less nice words.
Yeah.
And then
What's almost an initial like, say in this example, I'm just like scared for myself. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah, but also, if I did stick out my foot, you might think some other things about me. And
yeah.
but then, okay, you're a reasonable person, and you've learned all about local rationality, so you might think like, okay, why did it make sense for Rebekka to stick out her foot? Was she trying to save me from the truck that was coming in at high speed, and now at least
into the bench.
I fell on the sidewalk and not on the street. Yeah, all kinds of things. But do you judge yourself for having judgments to begin with?
I think
now that you go further into this program.
Oh, I absolutely do judge myself for having judgments. Yeah.
And is that reasonable, or is it just such an ingrained part of our system that you can just be mindful of that and say like, oh, I notice I have a judgment. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think when I say I judge myself for having a judgment, I'm like, wow, I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I had a judgment. But I am, I think, more aware. And it is interesting. I think in general, we default to, like, we do something, say, let me use this example. I'm driving and I bump into a car. And it's, let's say, like, whatever I was doing, let's say I was on my phone, on my work phone, I was managing work. I would tell myself, well, there's all these external circumstances. I had to manage this. I'm working a child sexual abuse case. I'm on the way here. I was late. It's not, I still may be like, this is my fault, but here's all these circumstances that led to it. Now, if I'm the car and someone hits me, I think we're really quick to default to whoever hit me, they're just an idiot who wasn't paying attention. They don't care.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have a license. They shouldn't. So I think we almost, when it's something we do, we tend to externalize it, and we have this local rationality of all these factors that played into it. But when someone else does something, we tend to make it more internal, that they're a bad person, that so, they don't care,
true,
that they're just an idiot. And I think that's something to be aware of, that we should look at other people actually perhaps as we do with these, play in these external stuff, because just saying someone's an idiot does not explain behavior in any way.
No. So that's the
why did someone do this thing? Well, because they're an idiot. Okay. That tells you nothing about why someone actually did something and why it made sense to them.
So this is a fundamental attribution error.
Yep. That's the word.
Why does it help us to think that way? Does it make life easier? Because maybe it makes life easier just to categorize people that way instead of like. So maybe it helps us to channel our emotions or our stress level to be angry at someone. Why do you think that happens?
I think so, and I think it's also, I think it's scary, the thought here and what we talk about, that the world is so uncertain, it's so complex, things will happen that we can't predict. We absolutely don't know everything. Sometimes bad things happen and no one is to blame. There's nothing at fault. This just happened. True. And I think accepting that is very unsettling and scary on some end. So I think it's much easier to default to saying someone's an idiot is in some sense a root cause. And it's easy and it's quick and it helps you explain something in a way pretty quickly than it is. Well, and logistically, it's just difficult to this person who hit me, right? Unless I sit down with them and interview them and, well, tell me everything about your day and what led up to this. And, it's hard to even understand what was going on in there.
Yeah, but it also, I think what's also important is that having this thought like, this is an idiot and that's why he did this, separates you from the category of idiots. So this couldn't happen to you because you obviously...
I'm not an idiot.
Well, I am not an idiot. I don't know about
you.
Yes. So this separates me. So I am not at risk of hitting you in the back of your car because I am not an idiot. I'm not at risk for hitting for running into the next car because I am not an idiot. He was an idiot, and it makes
that's a really good point.
It makes life a lot safer because if you're scared of that anything could happen to you. And of course it can, but if you're scared of that, then how do you live your life? If you go out on the street, like how can you go out on the street if anything could happen to you?
Yeah.
Well, if it only happens...
If you were aware of all the...
Yeah, if it only can happen to idiots, and those are a separate kind of...
it protects you.
Of people.
Yeah.
It protects you and you can...
Mentally, you're like, well...
You can live your life and think like, I should be scared of certain situations, but not all of life.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and I think that actually becomes problematic, or I don't know if problematic, but an observation is for our colleagues, for our people who do our same work. If they have a bad outcome happen, I think it protects our sense of self and purpose. Like, say, someone on my case had a bad outcome. They, in hindsight, should have taken more protective actions for this family, and a child ends up in a hospital due to abuse. It's easier for me to sit there and say, well, they're just a lazy case manager, or they don't care, because in that sense, what I'm saying is I'm not that wouldn't have happened to me.
Yes.
Because the thought that well, if I had all the information that this person had, I would have done the exact same things, and this outcome would have happened to me, is terrifying.
It's terrifying because it could happen to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this way, with this fundamental attribution error, it will not happen to you tomorrow because you're a separate kind of person.
Yep.
You're part of a different class of people.
Yep.
And that sounds really horrible, but it's a way we can manage to go through life.
Yeah. And it, do you think this is almost an ignorance is bliss situation?
It is, but it also causes harm.
It does, yeah, yeah.
And that's why I think like it's interesting how do we recognize the judgment where we should pause and think like, okay, here's an important this is important. I notice my bias, and I should pause and think like there might be a more complex factors in play, and I should really invest in getting to know someone's local rationality. So, and I don't have the answer for that yet. But so when do you notice the bias, and when should you pause and think? That would be interesting.
Absolutely. I think an obvious answer that comes to mind when you have to be very careful with recognizing this bias is, of course, if you're in a power role and your interpretation and construction of events can affect people's lives. I mean, like people's careers, people get fired over stuff like this, let alone the criminal prosecution side of when professionals get prosecuted criminally. And that carries a lot of weight. If you are the person investigating these adverse outcomes and you come with this judgment, well, this person's an idiot and they always, break this policy and they need to be punished. I mean, that like psychologically what that does to a person to feel like that and be shamed and get fired, and let alone the cases like Redonda Vaught where she's charged with involuntary manslaughter.
I think you make a really good point by saying people in power should do that, but even then, how do they recognize? Because you cannot pause all of the time for every judgment you make every day.
No, but those judgments. So, like, say this example, you trip me in the bag. I'm like, oh, Rebekka's just lazy and throws her bag. That's not, if I think that's not going to affect you or I's life.
Right.
But these persons, when we talk about people like who are looking into instances, I think that's when you have to be careful.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point, and I think power is important here. But then let's travel down that road, if you don't mind, because we're talking people in power now, hierarchical power.
Yep.
But let's take a trip to peers, same level. So as a peer,
I see where I think I know where you're going.
You've had a bad case. Should I reserve judgment until I know more? I think so.
Yeah.
I could still do damage to you.
Well, yeah, because and that goes back. Obviously, let's say you don't get fired, no criminal, but you're getting shamed socially, and I mean that feeling. It feels awful to feel that way. You walk into a workplace, and I made a mistake one time and actually kind of felt that I could tell I was being judged by some of my coworkers for what I had done, and I remember actually being quite distressed over it and just feeling really, really bad, like nervous to walk into my office. Like I felt.
I think so too, and then let's go to another level, and those are the ones that you have a power relationship with in another way, and that's, for instance, the people that you're helping, the families that you're helping.
Yes, that's a very good point. That taking those judgments, and unfortunately, I think a lot of child welfare systems are almost set up in the root cause thought that, well, let's find the concern and address it, when in reality it's a lot deeper, and there's so much that goes into, like, we talk about complex systems and we talk about big organizations. I mean, a family can be considered a complex system. You have all this history, this culture, these beliefs, these interconnected relationships between people in the family, extended family, friends, the community, the different places they go. So it's very important, I think, like you're saying, not to just default. We can't just say, well, mom is a bad mother and she doesn't need her kid. What's much more useful is, how can we best support mom what are some factors here, and how do we best address them in a way that makes sense? Because if we just default to, well, they're just an awful dad, awful mom, how, from that lens, you're not even trying to support them. You've already made up
Absolutely.
your mind.
Absolutely. So let's turn it around then, because should you reserve judgment to the ones that are higher up in power, and should those families reserve judgment on when you might have made a mistake in their eyes? Can you expect that of them?
I don't know.
Because you would call them perhaps from a healthcare point of view the first victim of probably
Yeah,
what you
if
might
a
have done to
mistake was
them.
made, yeah.
So they are actually the victims, um, and you feel bad. Should they reserve judgment on what you did,
I,
or
I
can you
don't
not expect
think,
it of them?
I don't know if you can, obviously you can't expect that of them, but I don't think their opinion of me affects them as much as how I perceive, like my perspective on them and my construction of, here's what this case is, here's my judgments on this family. I think that carries a lot more weight, and that affects that family a
Yeah.
lot more than whether they like me as a case manager or they think I suck. I, their judgments of me don't impact my life outside of my
Professional life,
professional life. Yeah,
right?
that I'm when I'm I mean, that's a lot of weight to work with these kids and families. I mean, you're talking about kids are the most important things
Yes.
to I mean, most societies, right? And parents, and you're talking about someone's child or children that you're discussing. That, I think, for me as an investigator, to reserve my judgment and be cautious of any biases is much more important than whether or not they like how I present myself or what I'm talking about or what I'm asking. So I think it's, I don't, ideally it would be a two-way street, but I think it's probably in a good way more important that I'm aware of these things.
I agree totally. I think you phrased it very well as well. And then I think the last party we should consider is in society. And for
We could
instance,
call third victims.
or the fourth victims. But for instance, if there's been a case with a bad outcome, the media jumps in and society forms an opinion, which can also be harmful for what happens to your service. It might also be beneficial, but usually there's a lot of harm involved as well. But then
And how do you even?
so then we're going into the restorative just culture network. Then we have called out all these people that could receive harm
Yep.
in the system, and I think that's the way we should go forward. Is much more. And I know you agree with me. Much more like, where's harm done in the system? What can we do to repair it?
Yeah, I agree. And I think when I was talking earlier about things that affect, I talked about firing, criminalization, but even outside, the media is another huge point, and stakeholder perceptions and how people view, and I guess that could be part of also how families judge if they're, but the media is, like we're saying, people are somewhat naturally inclined to blame and other stuff, and that those perceptions really matter. And I think a lot of times, I'm trying to think how to frame this exactly, but the media, one, looks for and often gets, after bad outcomes, executive leadership or other people blaming. Yeah. And then that reinforces this. I think it would be interesting, and I'm sure there's some organizations and cultures who do this, who can say, yes, this bad outcome happened. Our people do very hard work. We're here to support them. We're taking the steps, instead of, well, this worker didn't follow this policy and we fired her and her supervisor, so the problem is solved.
Yeah, I think it's very complex as well, because I think the role of the media could very well be to point out problems in the system and to make people aware of them, and I think that's a really important role of the media, especially also when it comes to seeing how governments function. However, I think in social systems, trust is also important, and a lack of trust can also do harm.
Absolutely.
In and of itself. And so a huge media circus it makes sense that it happens they have their own local rationality, and society um, has a local rationality, but we I think they don't consider that also can cause harm, and it makes sense. But I think as a society also, and we maybe as safety professionals should be the first to draft some ideas for that. Is like, how do we reduce harm in the whole system?
Yeah, yeah.
How do we
And how do we best support everyone?
how do we take care of each other?
And I think it's really important to support your workers, especially in fields like ours, where you're in a stressful job to start, and you're dealing with vulnerable populations or people who have been harmed. And how can you provide the best support for these people if you don't feel supported in yourself, in how you're being treated, and if you're fearful of what would happen if you don't do this, it may lead to more defensive stuff, which can cause problems too. So it's there's I mean, we could just go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, but yeah, it's very interesting worlds, and it's this program has definitely been it's been interesting on how it's changed my thoughts and perspectives, and
Yeah.
definitely expanded it.
So yeah, I think we can recommend it, right, to anyone who's interested in this field.
Yeah, like, so we're not being paid or sponsored, but if you are interested in more, go to Lund University, check out the Human Factors and System Safety program. It's yeah, it's very interesting. Our theses, once they're finalized, will be published. I mean, granted that'll be a year, but it's yeah, it's a cool program.
Yeah.
Well, I think anything else we should cover, or we can keep this one short. We do have class to get back to.
Yeah, we have class to get back to, and looking forward to that too. So I would say until next time, maybe.
Yeah, until next time. Live from a beautiful day in Lund, Sweden. Rebekka, as always, thank you so much. I literally told her this like 5 minutes before we started recording. I'm like, by the way, if you want to. So thank you so much for being open. And
it was a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, can't wait to look back on these. And it's very sad. This is our last official learning lab together. But
next time
is what it is. Until next time.